The bustling Denver terminal vibrated with its characteristic early morning energy. Passengers sipped pricey coffees, scrolled on their devices, or hurried toward their final gates. Amidst the throng, Miss Clara Vance navigated calmly through Gate 26, ticket in hand, a backpack slung over one shoulder. To all around her, she appeared as a typical traveler, just another face in the stream of commuters. Yet, Clara harbored a past no one on that flight could have envisioned. She boarded Flight 747, bound for Miami, and located her seat, 12A, by the window. She gazed out as the tarmac shimmered under the morning sun. Seatbelt fastened, tray table upright, phone in airplane mode. Everything appeared routine. But nothing about this journey would remain ordinary for long. Clara had once commanded the skies. A former naval aviator trainee with advanced flight education, she had accumulated hundreds of hours in flight simulators and aircraft cockpits before opting to pursue a career in software development. Her choice was deeply personal, a blend of exhaustion, bureaucratic hurdles, and a profound longing for a normal existence. Nearly 5 years had passed since she last manipulated flight controls. That segment of her life felt distant, almost surreal. But as the engines roared and the aircraft descended from the runway, Clara reclined and closed her eyes. Flying had once been second nature. Now, she preferred being a passenger, liberated from the burden of split-second decisions, shielded from risk. Or so she believed. 2 hours into the flight, turbulence struck. Minor at first, the kind that caused beverages to sway and seatbelts to tighten. Flight attendants offered polite smiles and instructed passengers to remain seated. Clara glanced up mildly, alert but still composed. Then came the second jolt, significantly more powerful. The plane plummeted sharply for 2 terrifying seconds. A few passengers shrieked. Overhead compartments burst open. A single oxygen mask prematurely descended from the ceiling. Clara straightened. Her instincts ignited. Then a loud impact. The entire aircraft tilted violently, first left, then right. Clara's heart leaped. Oxygen masks now dropped from every row. The cabin filled with gasps, cries, and shouts. Infants wailed. An elderly gentleman clutched his chest. The plane's lights flickered, and faint warning alarms buzzed from the cockpit. Clara did not panic. She analyzed. Her mind shifted into a mode she hadn't accessed in years. She counted the seconds between jolts, measured the angle of descent. Not a free fall, but a serious drop. Controlled? Perhaps. Perhaps. She looked toward the cockpit door, still sealed. No one emerged. A flight attendant stumbled past, attempting to soothe passengers. Clara reached out, steadying her. "Tell me what is transpiring," she requested. The woman paused. Her voice trembled. "They've declared a level 3 malfunction. One engine is offline. They're attempting to reset systems." Clara rose. The flight attendant attempted to stop her, but she raised her hand. "I'm a qualified pilot, naval certified. If they require assistance, I can provide it." The attendant looked at her, truly looked at her, and perceived something distinct. Not panic, not bravado, just purpose. The attendant nodded once. "I will inquire." Clara briefly sat back down, heart pounding. She hadn't occupied a cockpit in years. Could she genuinely intervene under these extreme conditions? A minute later, the attendant returned. "Co-pilot is incapacitated, unresponsive. Captain wishes to see you now." Everything in Clara's life up to this moment. All the training, the choices, the instances she doubted her own capability had led to this single, unforeseen, uninvited moment. But here it was. She rose, legs surprisingly steady, and walked down the aisle, past weeping children, terrified passengers, and flickering lights. As she reached the cockpit door, one thought resonated in her mind. I did not come here to fly, but perhaps I was destined to. And with that, the door opened. The cockpit smelled of scorched wiring and perspiration. The overhead panel pulsed with errors, red indicators blinking like a Christmas nightmare. Captain Miller, gray-haired and wide-eyed, looked up as Clara stepped in. "You're the passenger?" he inquired, voice hoarse. "Clara Vance," former naval aviator trainee, certified flight instructor. You summoned me. He nodded quickly and gestured her into the right-hand seat. The co-pilot was slumped to the side, unconscious. His oxygen mask was in place, but he was not responding. Clara instinctively checked his vitals. Pulse weak, shallow breathing, likely a pressure-induced syncope. She slipped into his seat without hesitation. We've completely lost the left engine. The right one is overheating. Autopilot is defunct. Navigation systems are malfunctioning. We are 28 minutes from Miami, but we cannot reach it, Captain Miller explained rapidly, wiping sweat from his brow. Also, we've lost air traffic control contact. Clara scanned the panel. Years of muscle memory activated. Although commercial jets differed from the smaller aircraft she trained in, the fundamentals remained unchanged. Lift, thrust, drag, gravity, and calm. Okay, she stated, slipping the headset on. Let's stabilize this aircraft. The control yoke felt rigid. Clara manually adjusted trim while rerouting power to emergency backups. The horizon display flickered, then stabilized sufficiently for her to recalibrate pitch. Slowly, steadily, she and the captain guided the plane out of its steep descent. Below them, rugged terrain loomed, snow-dusted mountain peaks and dense pine forests. They could not land there, and regaining cruising altitude was not an option with one failing engine. I require maps, she stated. Captain Miller slid over a backup tablet with offline terrain data. Clara scrolled rapidly, scanning coordinates. There, she pointed, whispering Pines Ridge, an abandoned airstrip from the Cold War era. It's not on modern flight plans, but it's within glide range. It's rough, short, but it's our best option. The captain stared at her, astonished. Are you certain about this? No, but we're running out of airspace. They manually adjusted their course. Clara sent a brief emergency signal through the secondary system, just enough to alert nearby responders. With their coordinates, there was no time for conversation, only data. Meanwhile, in the cabin, panic had transformed into an eerie silence. The flight attendants relayed short, vague updates. We have additional support in the cockpit. Passengers clutched armrests and prayed, still unaware that the support was another passenger. Back in the cockpit, Clara glanced at the altimeter. We need to slow descent. We'll come in hot. Too fast. I can attempt flaps. Negative. Hydraulic systems are down. We'll execute it manually. They rerouted power to stabilizers, trimming the aircraft's angle of attack for a shallower descent. The control stick vibrated with tension, warning them they were flying too close to stall speed. Clara adjusted gently. They flew lower now, just above the tree line. Flares glowed, faintly ahead, tiny dots in the vast dark terrain. Fire crews from a nearby town had raced to the strip after detecting the emergency signal. Makeshift landing lights were set up, vehicle headlights, flashlight signals, anything that could help guide the plane. Clara locked eyes with the captain. Do you wish to land her? He asked. She shook her head. You're in no condition. I've got it. He hesitated and slowly removed his hands from the controls. The captain of a 170-ton aircraft relinquished his plane to a woman who was supposed to be sipping orange juice in economy class. Clara wrapped her fingers around the yoke. Her shoulders tensed, but her heart was strangely calm. She left flight school not because of lack of skill, but because she was told she wasn't built for pressure. Funny how pressure brought her back. Landing gear, she muttered. The indicator was dead. She toggled the switch manually, hoping gravity would deploy the gear. A thud resonated beneath them. One down, perhaps. As the plane angled toward the narrow strip of cracked concrete in the wilderness, Clara inhaled. We're either landing or we're creating history. And with that, she commenced descent. The aircraft pierced through thinning clouds, emerging into open airspace. Beneath them, the Appalachian Mountains stretched endlessly, rugged, perilous, and unforgiving. The abandoned Whispering Pines Ridge airstrip was still 10 miles distant, barely visible from the sky. Clara leaned forward in her seat, every muscle focused, calculating pitch, descent speed, and glide ratio in her head. The wind howled against the damaged fuselage. One engine remained barely functional, coughing and sputtering with uneven thrust. Clara throttled it carefully, knowing too much strain might cause it to completely shut down. She did not speak. Neither did the captain. There was nothing further to express. In the cabin, passengers clung to their seats. Some prayed, others cried quietly. A few simply stared out the windows, watching trees rush beneath them as if it were their final view. No one knew that the woman now guiding the plane had once abandoned aviation, informed by her instructor that she was too emotional to handle a genuine crisis. Today, emotion was her driving force. Back in the cockpit, Captain Miller blinked through sweat. Descent path too steep. I know, Clara stated. There's no room to arc. We're coming straight in, short and fast. The airstrip wasn't designed for jets. It was an ancient military runway, barely long enough for small transport planes. Overgrown vegetation lined both sides. One wrong maneuver, one gust of crosswind, and the aircraft would overshoot or shatter upon impact. Clara took a deep breath. Her hands were locked on the yoke, white-knuckled but steady. She trimmed the nose slightly upward and reached for the manual landing gear lever. The wheels had deployed, but without hydraulic pressure, they might not lock. I require a visual on the gear, she stated. The captain utilized a backup inspection camera. Grainy black and white footage flickered to life. One gear is down, the others cannot confirm. We're landing regardless, she stated. 3 miles now, and the makeshift runway came into view. Fire trucks and rescue teams flanked the path with their lights on, providing faint visual guidance. Civilians stood behind a police line in stunned silence, watching the giant aircraft crawl toward their hidden town from the sky. The cockpit alarms began to wail. Stall warnings, low-altitude alerts, hydraulic failure signals. Clara silenced the noise. There was no time for warnings now. Either she landed this plane, or they all became a story buried in the mountains. Captain Miller reached for the yoke. Do you? I've got it, she stated firmly. He leaned back. In 25 years of flying, he'd never witnessed anyone take command like this, especially not someone who'd boarded as a civilian, coffee in hand. With one hand, Clara adjusted the throttle. With the other, she manually flared the wings. The plane tilted slightly, heading directly toward the narrow strip of land. The tail rudder twitched as the last bit of power dissipated. Now it's glide only, Clara gritted her teeth. Come on, just a few more seconds. Below, the ground rushed upward. The front wheels struck first, hard, then the rear slammed down with a metallic shriek. Sparks flew from beneath the cabin. The landing gear wobbled. Tires shredded from the friction. The plane bounced once, twice, then steadied. Clara slammed the manual brake controls. Smoke poured from the rear. Passengers screamed as oxygen masks swayed above them, their bodies tossed forward by the deceleration. The aircraft skidded for what felt like an eternity, then jolted, finally lurching to a complete halt just 40 feet before the tree line. For a moment, there was no sound. Then inside the cabin, a child whispered, "Did we just land?" A roar erupted. People cried, applauded, laughed. Flight attendants embraced each other. One collapsed to the floor in relief. In the cockpit, Clara slumped forward, her hand still on the yoke. Captain Miller broke the silence. You just achieved what most pilots could not. You didn't merely land the plane. You rescued a world. She did not answer. Not yet. The world outside rushed toward them. Flashing lights, rescue workers, chaos. But inside that cockpit, Clara Vance was motionless. The passenger was now the pilot. Clara sat still in the cockpit, her breath shallow, heart pounding in the quiet aftermath. The aircraft was stopped, the engine silent, the sky outside darkening into dusk. Inside the plane, the dim emergency lights bathed everything in a soft red hue. She could hear the sobs of passengers, the disbelieving laughter, the gasps of survival. But in her seat, her hands still gripped the yoke. Her brain hadn't caught up yet. She had done it. They were alive. Captain Miller turned toward her, face pale, expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing. Then slowly he extended his hand. That was the most impossible landing I've ever seen. And you did it. Clara blinked, looked down at his hand, and finally let go of the yoke to shake it. Her fingers were sore. She hadn't realized how tightly she was holding. "We need to get the passengers out," she stated. Her voice was rough, barely audible. Miller nodded. "Emergency exits. Let's move." Outside, emergency crews were already racing up to the aircraft. Firefighters sprayed the overheated engine with foam while paramedics prepared stretchers, not knowing what to expect. The cabin doors opened, inflatable slides deployed, and one by one, passengers began evacuating down to safety. Some were carried, others crawled. A few kissed the ground. Clara exited the cockpit last. She stepped into the cabin, and for the first time, met the eyes of those she had saved. A woman with 2 children clutched them close and mouthed, "Thank you." An elderly man tried to stand and salute her. One teenage boy just stared wide-eyed like he'd seen a superhero. She didn't know how to respond. She simply nodded, moved through the aisle, and helped guide the last group out the rear door. When she finally stepped onto the cracked concrete of Whispering Pines Ridge, a cheer erupted. Not organized, not even conscious, just spontaneous, raw, and deeply human. Survivors clapped, cried, and pointed toward the plane behind her. Paramedics rushed over. "Are you injured?" She shook her head. "I'm fine." The co-pilot, still unconscious in the cockpit, "He needs help first." They rushed past her, and she stood there motionless, surrounded by the chaos she had narrowly beaten. Searchlights cut through the night. Helicopters arrived. Reporters began to swarm behind the police line. News vans were already rolling up the ridge road. Clara turned and looked at the aircraft. Burned rubber and scorched metal marked its desperate skid down the makeshift runway. The landing gear was buckled, but intact. A miracle, really. A miracle built on training, instincts, and the part of herself she thought she had buried years ago. Captain Miller walked up beside her. "They're going to want her name, your face, your whole life story." She didn't answer. "They're calling it the landing of the century," he added. "But between us, I've flown for 30 years. I would have never attempted that. I would have ditched in the trees." She looked at him finally. "You were doing everything you could. You brought us down far enough to try. That mattered." He nodded once gratefully. "But you were the reason we walked away." Photographers gathered nearby. One tried to approach with a microphone. A reporter shouted, "Ma'am, were you really just a passenger? How did you achieve it?" Clara turned away from them. "I'm not giving interviews," she stated quietly. "Not today." She found a quiet spot by the fire truck and sat down on the back bumper. Someone handed her a water bottle. Her hands trembled as she opened it. She'd done something no one expected. Not her colleagues in tech, not her family, not even herself. But deep down, a truth was forming. She hadn't landed that plane in spite of being a woman, or a former pilot, or a passenger. She landed it because she never stopped being who she was, even when the world did. By morning, Clara Vance's name was trending across every major news outlet in the nation. Headlines read, "Passenger lands plane after engine failure. Civilian saves 181 lives. Former naval trainee performs miracle landing." Her face, taken from a blurry passenger photo, snapped moments after the landing, was on every screen, stunned, silent, perspiring, but alive. She hadn't spoken to the press yet. After the landing, she'd spent the night in a small fire station bunk near the airfield, refusing interviews and ignoring calls. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, military officials, even movie agents. But Clara remained quiet. A knock came at the fire station door just before dawn. It was Captain Miller. "They've asked us both to appear at a press conference in Nashville," he stated. "Federal Aviation Administration, airline representatives, the governor, they wish to honor what you did." "I didn't do it for honors," she muttered. "I know. That's why you deserve it." Reluctantly, she agreed. She owed the passengers that much. As they rode down the ridge road in a black SUV, escorted by police, she looked out the window, trying to process what had happened. She hadn't even informed her parents yet. They were probably witnessing everything unfold on TV with the rest of the country. The press conference was chaos. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved toward her. She stood beside Captain Miller, who delivered a heartfelt speech praising her courage, calm, and skill. Then it was her turn to speak. She stepped up to the podium. For a moment, she just stared at the sea of cameras. "I was a passenger," she began, "but I'm also a trained pilot, one who walked away from flying years ago because I was told I wasn't suited for high-pressure situations, that I wasn't suited for emergencies." She paused, voice steady but sharp. "Well, this was an emergency." Reporters scribbled furiously. Clara continued, "I didn't save that plane alone. The captain gave me space. The crew stayed composed. The firefighters illuminated the runway. Everyone played a part. But yes, I flew the plane. Il dit. And I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I had to. Because people were depending on someone to act." The room fell quiet. A beat passed. Then applause. Not polite clapping. A genuine, thunderous ovation. When she stepped down, people were crying. A senior airline director embraced her, whispering, "You've just inspired every young woman who's ever been told she can't do something." Over the next few days, the offers poured in. Major airlines desired to employ her. Military officials requested her return to service. Book publishers emailed with advance deals. A famous talk show host requested an exclusive appearance. Hollywood studios circled for rights to her story. But Clara wasn't interested in fame. What caught her attention was a single handwritten letter. It came from a girl in Kansas, 12 years old. She wrote, "I saw you on TV. My brother says girls can't fly planes, but I saw you do it. I want to be like you." That was the moment something shifted in Clara. This wasn't just about surviving a disaster. It was about showing others what was possible. She contacted the airline. "Instead of a speaking tour or a sponsorship, I want you to fund a flight training scholarship for girls, minorities, anyone told they're not cut out for it." The airline CEO personally called her to say yes. That week, the Clara Vance Flight Academy Fund was established. And while she still refused interviews, she did make one quiet appearance, visiting a local flight school in Seattle to speak to young cadets. Her message was simple. Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you take the controls anyway. Weeks passed. The frenzy subsided, but Clara Vance's story continued to ripple through the nation. Aviation schools reported a spike in female applicants. Young girls now carried notebooks with her quotes written on the covers. At airports, strangers stopped her. Some cried, some hugged her, all thanked her. Still, Clara avoided the spotlight. She had no publicist, no social media presence. She kept flying, but from the ground as a mentor, not a hero. One evening, as she locked up the small flight academy she'd helped open outside Seattle, a black government vehicle pulled into the lot. A tall man in uniform stepped out. "Miss Vance?" he inquired. "Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Riley, U.S. Air Force." Clara felt her chest tighten. That name, that uniform, it pulled memories from the vault she had closed years ago. "I recall you," she stated. "You conducted evaluations at Northwood Base." He nodded. "And I recall you. You possessed the best hands I'd ever witnessed in the simulator, but you withdrew. I was told I didn't belong." Riley nodded, as if expecting the response. "You were told incorrectly, and some of us knew it. But the system, it didn't know how to value what it couldn't measure." Clara folded her arms. "Why are you here, Colonel?" He pulled a small folder from his jacket and handed it over. Inside, a recommendation letter, a formal invitation, a reinstatement package. "We desire your return. Full certification, advanced tactical and emergency response training, civilian or military track. Your choice." She blinked. "This because of the landing?" "This is because the world witnessed who you truly are, under pressure, in chaos, when lives are at stake. That's not something we teach. That's instinct. That's leadership. And honestly, we require more of you." Clara stared at the papers. She hadn't occupied a real cockpit in years before that flight. And yet, when the moment came, her body knew what to do. She'd faced the fire alone and made the impossible choice. But returning, "I'm not interested in being a symbol," she stated. "You already are," Riley replied. "But what you do with that?" "No, that's the part you still control." He left her with the folder. No pressure, just a nod of respect as he drove off into the dusk. That night, Clara sat on her porch, staring at the sky. She remembered being 16, standing on a runway for the first time, watching fighter jets roar into the clouds. She remembered how desperately she wished to be part of that world. Not to prove something, but because she loved the sky, the silence, the power, the freedom. And she remembered the day she walked away after being told she wasn't resilient enough, calm enough, command material. But now she'd landed a 170-ton commercial jet on a damaged airstrip using instinct, memory, and sheer will. Something even seasoned captains said they'd never attempt. And people weren't applauding because she was fortunate. They were applauding because she'd achieved what few others ever could. She opened the folder again. Reread the letter. The words didn't pressure her. They invited her. That weekend, she made her decision. She called Riley. I'm not returning full-time. There was a pause on the line. Understood. But I will instruct, she stated. Not in classrooms. In the air. With real trainees. Real emergencies. You desire pilots ready for chaos? I'll demonstrate to them what it means to remain level when everything is collapsing. Riley laughed softly. That's the best possible outcome. The next week, Clara Vance commenced a new role. Special instructor for advanced in-flight emergency simulation. She trained not just on theory, but on mindset, instinct, and the rare courage to act when no one else will. The woman who was once just a passenger now shaped the next generation of pilots. 3 months had passed since the landing. Clara Vance had found a rhythm. Part flight instructor, part mentor, part quiet legend. She avoided fame, but she couldn't avoid legacy. Flight academies across the country requested her as a guest trainer. The Vance Fund, her scholarship program for underrepresented aviation students, had already funded 12 new cadets. Her days were long, filled with simulators, student drills, and quiet afternoons in the hangar. One rainy evening, as she finished a debrief at the academy, her assistant walked in. There's someone here to see you, she stated. He says he was on your flight. Clara froze. She stepped out into the lobby where a teenage boy stood nervously, damp from the rain, a duffel bag at his feet. He looked up and gave a sheepish smile. You probably don't recall me, he stated. I was in seat 23C. I watched you walk to the cockpit. Clara stared for a beat, then slowly nodded. I remember. He took a deep breath. My name is Daniel. I was flying to Miami to live with my dad after my mom passed. I believed that flight was going to be the end of everything. I was certain I'd never land. Clara softened. A lot of people felt that way. But you changed it, he stated. When I discovered it was you, a passenger, who landed us, something in me shifted. I couldn't cease contemplating it. He reached into his bag and pulled out a worn notebook. He opened it and flipped through pages filled with sketches. Airplanes, cockpits, diagrams, checklists. I desire to fly, he stated quietly. I wish to be like you. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. Daniel continued. I've been reading manuals, practicing on simulators online. I work part-time at a mechanic shop to save for lessons, but it's going to require years. I thought perhaps you could advise me on what I need to do. Clara stepped forward and took the notebook from him. Flipping through the pages, she perceived potential, not just in the sketches, but in his eyes. She saw what she once had, a hunger to ascend, to command the uncontrollable, to escape gravity itself. Possess the right instincts, she stated. You merely require the right tools. Daniel smiled, but it was a sad smile. Tools cost money. I comprehend that. Clara handed the notebook back. Have you ever heard of the Vance Flight Fund? His eyes widened. That's yours. She nodded. It exists for individuals like you. Children who received a second chance and wish to utilize it. Daniel was speechless. Complete the application, she added. Better yet, don't trouble yourself. You're already accepted. Your full training will be covered. He stared at her, lips trembling. Are you serious? I don't offer that to just anyone. But you appeared. You arrived here. That demands more than most people realize. Daniel attempted to speak, but instead hugged her, sudden, tight, full of every emotion he hadn't articulated. Clara was surprised at first, then returned the embrace. You're going to fly, Daniel, but more than that, you're going to lead. That night, after he left with his acceptance packet in hand, Clara sat alone in the empty hangar. Rain pattered on the roof. Outside, mist curled over the runway lights. She thought of all the things that had brought her here. The dismissal from the naval forces, the years away from the skies that cursed flight, the panic, the cockpit, the impossible landing. And now this boy. She didn't need trophies or headlines. She didn't want medals. This was her legacy, transforming lives, one quiet narrative at a time. The years that followed were a quiet revolution. Clara Vance never sought fame. She didn't pursue accolades or television appearances. Instead, she built something far greater, a community of pilots, dreamers, and survivors inspired by her story. The Clara Vance Flight Academy became a sanctuary for those told they couldn't, wouldn't, or shouldn't fly. Daniel graduated first in his class. His name was now one among dozens of young aviators who owed their commencement to a passenger who once assumed command in an emergency. Women, minorities, and underdogs found wings through the Vance Fund, soaring where doors had been closed. Clara herself returned to the cockpit once more, not as a passenger, but as an instructor, confident, calm, and fierce. Each flight she led was a lesson not only in mechanics, but in courage. She taught pilots to trust instinct, to embrace fear, and to own the moments when everything seemed lost. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the golden sun dipped below the horizon, Clara sat by the window of the small control tower at Whispering Pines Ridge. The runway was repaired, modernized, and busy with new planes, a far cry from the abandoned strip that once saved lives. She watched a young woman taxi a small plane down the runway, ascending into the sky with practiced ease. It was Daniel's sister, another scholarship recipient. Clara smiled, feeling the familiar pull of the sky in her chest. Her phone buzzed. A message from Captain Miller. Flight 747 reunion next month. Your place of honor is waiting. She typed back, I'll be there, but let them know I was never alone up there. That night, as she prepared to attend the reunion, Clara reflected on her journey. From the passenger seat to the cockpit, from fear to leadership, from silence to legacy. She realized that heroism wasn't about glory. It was about the quiet strength to act when no one else can. It was about lifting others when they fall. It was about turning moments of crisis into chapters of hope. As she boarded the plane once more, this time as a respected pilot and mentor, Clara felt the sky embrace her like an old friend. The hum of the engines, the rush of wind, the endless horizon. They reminded her that every flight, every moment, was a chance to rewrite the story. She was no longer just a passenger. She was a pilot of lives, dreams, and futures. And the sky, vast, unpredictable, and beautiful, was hers to command.